BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Thomas Duncan, and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Wednesday the 23rd of April, and we're going to focus on Hibernian.
We don't get in for the last 17 games on Saturdays. That's all done, and whatever's done is in the past. We just need to look forward and look at the next game, which we have done throughout the running.
Chris Cadden keeping focused as David Gray's side push for third place. Things aren't quite so happy across Edinburgh though.
John Beaton's waiting for him to get back up on his feet.
He went for his card.
Yeah. Another yellow has come out, and it's a red card for Cammy Devlin in the dying moments.
Hearts seek answers from the SFA over Cammy Devlin's semi-final dismissal. Plus, should he stay or should he go?
It's deflected in! It's deflected in! Taylor caught it at the edge of the box! Talk about making amends! The man who sold the Rangers goal equalises in the final for Celtic!
Will Greg Taylor be a Celtic player next season?
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Right, joining me this morning are the two Stevens, Stephen McGowan, the football writer for the Herald at Large, and Stephen McGinn, former Falkirk, Kilmarnock, St Mirren, Hibernian midfielder, etc. Stephen, morning to you both. How are you?
Good morning, Thomas.
Lots to discuss. Let's start with Hibernian, third place in their sights. Visit Pittodrie this weekend. A remarkable 17-game unbeaten run in the league. Stephen McGinn, if I start with you, what do you think are the key reasons behind their ascent up the Premiership table?
Well, I mean, there's loads of things I can point to. Not probably one main one. The manager's calmness. His calmness is probably something you would associate with an experienced manager. I think the fact he's been about the club for a couple of seasons, it kept him calm. He knows he could get out the group. He knows the club inside out. But the change in formation has been massive for him, for his staff, for his players. A lot of Hibs players have reinvented themselves with this formation. You look through the squad, someone like Lewis Miller, really struggling as a Hibs player as a right back. Came into his own right of a three. Rocky Bashiri, really struggling in the two at the back. Moved to a three, the middle of the three, almost an old-fashioned sweeper, and he's probably been in the shout half player of the season in the second half of the season. So you just go round the squad and you just start to think Jack Iredale probably not got the pace to be as an out-and-out left back or one of the two centre halves, but as a left centre half, he's been absolutely perfect. The strikers almost going to a split with either Junior Hoylett or Josh Campbell hitting the box. It's just the way they restructured it into the kind of 3-5-2. It's just been perfect for a lot of the players.
Stephen, it's a good point Stephen mentions there about David Gray keeping calm and having the insight to make those changes that has transformed this. How impressed have you been by that? Because I think it's easy to forget just how big a storm they were in at the start of the season after that 4-1 hammering at Dens.
I don't think I'll ever forget how big a storm they were in, for the simple reason that the night they played Aberdeen at Easter Road, I was doing the much missed The Nine on the BBC Scotland channel, and Sheila McLaren was interviewing me that night. And Dessa Sokler made it 3-2 to Aberdeen, I think in about the 94th or 95th minute. And I remember saying, well, that's it, David Gray's a dead man walking, he can't possibly survive this. Of course, 30 seconds later, Rocky Bashiri pops up and makes it 3-3, and they've really never looked back since then, actually. They have never looked back. It was almost like a sliding doors moment in the season. And actually someone sent me some stats of a data modelling company just the other week there, which said that amongst the 500 top global clubs, Hibs are the fourth best improved. They're up there in terms of their improvement with Nottingham Forest, who've had a sensational season in England. So I think it speaks to the improvement David Gray's brought around, so much so that I don't know if Celtic fans will sputter into a conflict when they say this, but I think he must be coming into the conversation serious as a manager of the year contender.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly if they manage to finish the job and finish third, and obviously they're pretty much guaranteed European football with the way things are after Celtic got through to the Scottish Cup final, but they'll be eyeing that third place. Yeah, 17 games unbeaten in the league, 77-year-old record that was broken for them. I think they've only conceded more than one goal, Stephen, in a game once since in this unbeaten run. That was the 3-3 at home to Rangers. So, I mean, that really is the foundation, isn't it, their defence? And I maybe shout out Jordan Smith as well, because I was looking at some stats from him. I remember the start of the season, Bursik was struggling. He came in. I think some people not fully convinced by Jordan Smith either, but I think only Kasper Schmeichel's got a better save percentage in the top flight than Jordan Smith. He's done so well to come in and steady the ship.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for a goalkeeper that goes under the radar. I mean, firstly, you don't want your goalkeeper always in the headlines because he's either making mistakes or he's having to make far too many saves. Jordan Smith has brought a calmness to the whole thing. As I said, the whole defensive structure is better. The game I can reflect on during the bad times is Dundee away, up at Dens Park. They are under the cosh. There's a lot of noise, a lot of pressure around Hibs. They get the perfect start in an away game. Nicky Cadden scores after a minute or two. Then Jordan Abita gets sent off, but you're still okay, or 1-0. It's Hibs getting into a shape, get in at half time, and they concede 3 in the first half. And it's the stats you speak about and you look from this 17 run. A side that couldn't even get to half time almost with 10 men without shipping 3 goals look as defensively sound as any team has done in the last few years.
Yeah, I kind of throw it forward. We're not even at the end of the season, Stephen, but it's always fascinating that we tend to have clubs who do well for one season and maybe get to third place. We've seen Hearts do it, we've seen Aberdeen do it, Kilmarnock in terms of fourth place last season, and very few clubs, if any, in recent times anyway, have been able to, maybe since Derek McInnes's Aberdeen, have been able to sustain it season after season after season. I guess now we're at the point where with this form has gone on for so long that you're looking at Hibs next season, and they've got some players out of contract, obviously tied down Lewis Miller for another year there, but I guess a lot of fans will be thinking, how do we keep this group together? How do we sustain this over the course of next season as well?
It's fascinating because I think if you look at earlier in the season when they really were having a difficult time, I think a lot of supporters would have been happy to hunt most of these players. I think there was a feeling that they were actually quite an expensive squad who weren't really providing much bang for their buck. Well, I think you're right, Thomas. I think there's a really interesting conversation to go on now because clearly the wheel has turned full circle. They have players, like Rocky Bashiri, who we spoke about before, who was a much maligned figure.
Well, it was almost a mistake they signed him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they were forced into a slightly embarrassing U-turn. And now I think most people regard him as one of the most improved defenders in the country. Now, look, I mean, there's still a mistake in there from time to time, there will be, but I mean, as Stephen mentioned earlier as well, Jack Iredale and so on, just players who you've seen this monumental improvement in. You look at Nicky Cadden coming in, making a big difference now, he's fit again as well. So there's some really big decisions to be made, especially if, as you would imagine, Bill Foley's Black Knights group are looking to exert a little bit of influence in recruitment. It will be fascinating to see at the end of the season whether they do manage to keep this team together and, as you say, kick on and keep on improving.
Yeah, Stephen McGinn, because you look at Martin Boyle's one of those out of contract where you're starting to see the best of him this season after that ACL injury, which it tends to take a long time to recover from fully, especially for maybe older players. It's Nectar Triantis as well, obviously on loan. He's been absolutely critical in midfield. Unclear whether they'll be able to get him back. So it is difficult for any side, perhaps outside with Celtic and Rangers, to keep a squad together.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think there is ones. Nectar Triantis looks like a real asset for them. He's really grown. There's ones like Martin Boyle. Martin Boyle has a player that's probably for the last few seasons felt almost restricted in structure. I know he's had injuries, but there's probably been managers that are asking Martin Boyle. Martin Boyle's a bit of a free spirit. I think I'm sure Stephen will have interviewed him. The great thing about Dave Gray and some of his staff, they've all worked with Martin Boyle. They know what he's like. They know how to get the best in him. He bumped into him a couple of times and he's back really enjoying life on and off the park as a Hibs player. And it's just that. It's what the Hibs players now that 6 months ago maybe were counting down the days to move on, or thinking about the January window to move on. They've all got a big decision to make in terms of what Hibs are building, looking to the future European football back at Easter Road, and that challenge probably for Hibs, assuming they finish third, of not having a drop off, go and finish third again, because that is probably a challenge over the last few years for that teams are getting third, and that with the extra games in Europe, they're having a drop off.
You would like to think, looking at Martin Boyle, if you look at that experience when he was in the Middle East, when he went out there, it would have been a difficult experience. You would have thought he would have made a few quid. You'd like to think he would feel, Stephen said there, that he's found a bit of comfort again, and that he will come out a little bit longer, and that they will manage to keep him there, because he's absolutely key, isn't he?
Yeah, Stephen, obviously Aberdeen away at the weekend. I guess with the advantage they've got in terms of points, they've beaten Aberdeen twice already this season. You'd make them favourites for that game and third place as a whole.
I think you have to make them favourites for third place as a whole, just based on recent form. I mean, Aberdeen have obviously managed to steady the ship a little bit. I mean, that game I referred to earlier, the 3-3 at Easter Road, was actually also where Aberdeen began to go off the rails a little bit, and they had that massive wobble. But I think in the last 11 games, I think they've only lost, I think, is it 2 maybe, I think it is. So Jimmy Tilley has managed to steady the ship. I think as long as they managed to avoid Hibs going down to 10 men in the first half, they should be okay, because that just seems to be the scenario where Aberdeen have difficulty when get up against 10 men in the last 2 games. Breaking down teams who sit in seems to pose them a problem. I don't think that'll be an issue when they're playing against Hibs.
Yeah, that'll be an exciting one as the Premiership starts to draw to a close. The run-in, that fight for European football. Let's go across Edinburgh now, though, and talk about Hearts, who delivered a classic Scottish football statement, really, Stephen McGowan, one that you've read maybe a few times in your career in terms of the officiating. First of all, do you think they have a point in terms of Cammy Devlin's dismissal and their overall sense that they've been hard done by this season? And 2, do these statements really serve any other purpose other than to, voice the frustration of the fans? In fairness to Hearts, they are a fan-owned club after all.
I think you've summed it up there. They are a fan-owned club. And I think for Andrew McKinlay, the chief executive, I think there's always a balance to be struck between, on one hand, he's on the SFA board, so he is kind of overseeing the officials, but also he is in charge of a fan-owned club where there's going to be natural anger and frustration. Because I think most people would agree the second yellow card for Cammy Devlin was really harsh. I think it was a bit of a nonsense. And there was a bit of previous as well with John Beaton. If you remember that penalty claim against Rangers with Clinton and Ciala against James Wilson at Tynecastle, where they felt they should have had a penalty. So there is growing frustration there. But to get to the kind of nub of your point, I think there is an element of these statements of pandering to angry fans. I think there is frustration amongst supporters, particularly amongst the fan-owned clubs, and I think they've all done it. I think most clubs have done it. Celtic have done it. Rangers have done it. Aberdeen have done it. Statements are now the way in which they release pent-up emotions, and I think we just have to accept it. They're a fact of life these days.
Indeed. Steve McGinn, do you understand their frustration? The decisions on Saturday in particular, or certainly the second sending off?
No, understand the frustration in terms of playing well, and it seemed to be a semi-final that everything just seemed to just keep going wrong in terms of red cards and even Shankland. You're starting to think about penalty, Shankland getting cramped, but Cammy Devlin being a midfielder, getting a booking, okay. I think it might have been Stephen Robinson said about refs being able to look at yellow cards. I don't know if it's something that can maybe be brought in. We're always looking at changing the game. Maybe one yellow card that you get to go to VAR and say, can we have a look at that to overturn it? Because being on a yellow card as a midfielder, it's 2 things. Either you get taken off early by a manager because he's worried about you being on a yellow card, or you lose the opportunity to get involved in anything. When Cammy Devlin pulls the Aberdeen player back in the kind of little melee not long before his second yellow, I'm thinking you're alerting John Beaton to the fact you're on a yellow card. He's almost kind of, you stay out this, you're on a yellow card. And as I said to you, as a midfielder, someone that didn't get sent off, I've been on a yellow card long enough. It's a total accident what he does, but you leave any leg out on a yellow card, after you've just alerted the referee, I've watched the video, he's committed a number of fouls during the game, all kind of small-ish fouls, but I just think, don't get involved. As soon as that happens, it gives John Beaton a pretty easy decision, in my opinion.
On Hearts, more generally, Stephen McGowan, there's some statistics that Neil Critchley has pointed to that go in his favour in terms of the job he has done, and undoubtedly their situation has improved. I think they're fourth in the form table as and when he took over, behind only Hibs, Rangers and Celtic. They've generally been quite consistent against teams that they would be expected to beat, save for the crucial ones right at the end of the run into the split. So I guess he's got a body of evidence that he has done an effective job to a point. But this whole thing about big games continues to hang over him. Some fans continue to question whether he's the right man, which can be difficult to come back from. Is there anything he can do in these remaining 5 games to get more of those onside, do you think?
I suspect the best thing you can hope for is a Hibs collapse, to be honest with you. I mean, I think that's probably done him no favours whatsoever. But yeah, if you look at the record against Celtic, against Rangers, against Aberdeen and against Hibs, it's problematic for any Hearts manager because you have to win those big games. I think what you would say is that when he came in, Hearts have rock bottom of the league with 2 points from something like 7 or 8 games. So they have absolutely improved things. And I think his point that if he'd been in from the start of the season, they wouldn't be in anything like this situation is probably fair. I think the other side to this as well is that we talk about top 6. Well, okay, it's massively disappointing to miss out in the cup final. I don't think there should be an overreaction to missing out in the top 6 because it's quite an artificial construct. It doesn't matter massively if you finish 7th, 3rd or 6th. Not really. We've just created this kind of narrative in Scotland. It is disappointing, but I think Hearts are moving in the right direction. I think Jamestown Analytics have to be given time and opportunity to improve the standard of player they are signing. I think the evidence from January is a bit mixed. I think this is the big window coming up now. The question really is, and it's not for me to answer, thankfully, is whether Neil Critchley is the man to deliver the sustained improvement that they're looking for. That falls to directors. Personally, I wouldn't overreact. I would stick with it a bit longer, see if they can get a tune out of the team in the summer. But I think that semi-final put them under huge pressure, didn't it?
Yeah, indeed. It's the big game record that is a bit of a millstone around his neck, and he won't get the chance to fix that in the final 5 games of the season. Neil Critchley, big summer ahead at Hearts. Craig Gordon out of contract, Lauren Shankland out of contract as well. Perhaps not quite as big a summer at Celtic, but nonetheless, some things to be sorted out, including the future of left-back Greg Taylor, who seemed to be departing, deciding not to sign a new contract, but that could be now changing. Stephen McGowan, perhaps Celtic going to offer him slightly improved terms. I guess it's zigged and zagged, but Brendan Rodgers has made clear that he would love to have him next season.
Yeah, he's a big figure in the dressing room. He is an influential player, he's a senior player, but the big question really is for Greg Taylor, not just around the financial side. I know he's recently become a father again, but will he play as many big games if he is there when Kieran Tierney's on the premises as well? And I know there's this question mark about Kieran Tierney's injury record. I think that's slightly exaggerated actually, with respect to the fact that if you look back at the last 4 seasons, Kieran Tierney has been good for 40 games a season, maybe 45. So the question you'll be asking if you're Greg Taylor is, after being accustomed to playing Champions League games and playing the big games against Rangers and so on, is he happy to take the risk of potentially playing 20 or 25 games a season against Ross County and Dundee and so on, and maybe in the League Cup? So that's a big question for him to ask. I suppose only he knows his own personal circumstances. I think for Celtic's point of view, it would be excellent if they could have 2 really good seasoned Scotland international left-backs. Certainly in terms of the experience of what they bring to the dressing room. In terms of the finance of the 2 of them together, that's a bigger question, because you probably talk about the guts of 60 grand on 2 full-backs, 2 left-backs. Are they willing to pay that? Well, time will tell, I suppose.
Yeah, it would certainly be a bit of a departure from Celtic's normal model, wouldn't it, Steve? Steve McGinn, you've been in that position as a player. Put yourself in Greg Taylor's shoes. What would you do?
Well, I mean, it's hard to make that definitive call in terms of not knowing figures behind the scenes.
Yeah, I unfairly put you on the spot there.
No,
but what do you think is going through Greg Taylor's mind? What's he weighing up?
I think everything Stephen McGowan says there in terms of weighing up the games you're going to play financially it will be your last big contract. He's off the back of playing a lot of games consecutively, a lot of big games. He's been great for Celtic, not a lot of injuries, always available, really reliable. I think it's his last big contract, so he's got to do right by him first and foremost. You'd also be aware that you're at a massive club. There's going to be windows where the manager signs good players. You're not going to be competing against maybe a Laxalt or a Bernabei. There's going to be Jeffrey Schlups and Kieran Tierney every now and then, so the fight gets harder to stay at big clubs. That's why you respect guys like Callum McGregor that do it for so long. I'd also point to the fact that Kieran Tierney, although his injury record is exaggerated, he's not going to be Callum McGregor. If Brendan Rodgers is able to leave him out at times, if he's able to get him off at half time or 60 minutes, then he'll do it to protect them. I think there's a lot of games there for Greg Taylor. I think at times they can play together. There's absolutely no reason for an Atalanta away next year, a Borussia Dortmund away, a Bayern Munich away. There's absolutely no reason they both can't play down the same side. So if it was me, if it was Greg Taylor and if it was Celtic, I would want to make the deal happen.
Yeah, Stephen McGowan, it's interesting because he's a player that has perhaps unfairly retracted a lot of criticism from Celtic fans at times. I think the sense is that Champions League level, some think he's not good enough, and I did a piece for the BBC Sport website which is up, and it's just about some of those defensive numbers in the Champions League aren't as good as, say, Alistair Johnson's, but at the end of the day it's the Champions League. Even the best players get caught out at that level. Do you think he's come in for some unfair stick at times?
I think it's just the price of being a Scottish player. I think at a big club in Scotland sometimes, I do feel that the local guys probably do come in for slightly more savage scrutiny than overseas players, just with a slightly longer length of rope to deal with. I think there was a theory that opponents were targeting Greg Taylor for a while there, maybe because of his lack of physique, possibly. I don't really know whether that's right or not. I think a lot of it is unfair. I think Stephen will know this better than me, but you can't underestimate the value of a really exceptional professional around the dressing room and what he brings to the club. And that's what Brendan Rodgers keeps emphasising. Supporters don't see what he does on a daily basis around the club, what he does in the training ground, the influence he has on younger players. Brendan Rodgers can evaluate that better than any supporter can. So, with the best will in the world, I think they should bow to the manager's superior knowledge.
Well, indeed, we'll see how that one plays out in the final month or so of the season, whether Greg Taylor will be a Celtic player next season. That's all we've got time for today. Many thanks to both Stephen McGinn and Stephen McGowan, and thank you for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Thanks very much for listening. Till next time, goodbye.
On BBC Sounds. From life aboard a Russian submarine to chairman of Hearts Football Club.
At this stage, he was the hero.
But as his controversial decisions escalated...
They said, we're going to sack George. And I'm going, you can't do this.
How did Vladimir Romanov go from Hearts saviour to a wanted man?
They caused a whole load of chaos and havoc.
Romanov, Tsar of Hearts. Listen now on BBC Sounds.